A lot of people do not assume this about me, but there are long stretches of time where I can be a deeply insecure person. I'll need constant approval and validation, and whenever I'm not getting it right that moment, my mind will immediately go down into a spiral of, oh no, this person doesn't like me now, they look down on me, they're angry with me. Which, you know, is of course bullshit is what it is. It's like I literally do the same thing. I'll get a message from like, oh, this is a cool person, I like this person. I need to get back to them, but I can't right this very moment. And then very often I forget because my mind is like a sieve. And then there's these especially depressive phases where I just feel intense jealousy, especially at people that I admire, which is so incredibly irritating because it's such a better feeling to be happy for their accomplishments. That's actually a really nice emotion to experience. But I will feel the opposite, which does like a lot of damage to my self-esteem. This gets so ridiculous that the other day, and I shit you not, this happened, I thought to myself, damn, it's so sad that I don't have like a sonorous, deep voice acting voice like I myself do. I'm really jealous of me for having that. One of my old therapists once told me about the concept of unsatisfied primary narcissism, and it kind of changed the game in the way that I view myself and my self-esteem. And I'm gonna explain it to you, but then I'm also gonna explain another game changer that I discovered recently that has really, I'm trying to put that into praxis properly. So basically, primary narcissism is not actually like the bad kind of narcissism, it is the love and validation that you're supposed to receive as a child. It's when you cry, it might be over something that literally only a child would get upset over, and then somebody goes there, gives you a hug, and says, oh, it's okay to cry, because it is okay to cry. You know, shit sometimes happens, and it feels bad, but everything's gonna be fine. It's when you accomplish something that only a child could, like, find to be a kind of accomplishment, and an adult comes by and says, that's very cool that you did that. I am very impressed and proud that you did this extremely basic thing. It's somebody that you look up to, and, you know, it's your parents and parental figures going, you know, you are important, you are valid, and your, you know, beliefs, your ideas, your opinions, how you feel is something that is allowed to exist in the world. I know this is a bit of a trope, but the real world doesn't really care about cliches all that much. Not having your primary narcissism satisfied during your childhood and, like, teenage years will just mold you into a fundamentally insecure person. Because as a kid, you cannot conceive of the idea that maybe your parents not giving you any love or affection, or even worse, basically weaponizing the love and affection to only give it to you conditionally when you do exactly what they expect you to do, essentially just manipulating you with like a positive emotional reinforcement beyond just like the basic how do you educate a child to be a functioning human being. You cannot imagine that maybe them doing those things is like wrong. We are neurologically hardwired to think as children that our parental figures are right and correct and good in everything they do. And so what happens when we then do not receive the validation and attention that we so desperately crave as kids is the only explanation that we can come up with for why this is the case is I am not enough. I am insufficient. I'm not good enough. I am not worthy of receiving the attention and the validation. And because this happens in such a very formative phase of our lives where we develop like a sort of self-concept, it really just molds the foundation of how we view ourselves. It influences pretty much everything in the mind built from that point forward. And you don't even need to like remember any specific traumas for this, that your mind is just going to be shaped this way. Needless to say, this happened to me. I'm not gonna get into too much detail because it's probably boring, it's a bit fucked up, I don't remember a lot of it, and the things that I do remember, I don't like to remember. But this need for validation, of course, doesn't go away when you stop being a kid. Everybody needs validation, even like adults, and usually a big foundation of where a lot of that validation comes from is your own self-confidence. Usually that and just the baseline of validation that you usually tend to get from your environment can keep you going just fine. You have self-confidence based off of that, and when you're in a tough spot, you need a bit more validation, which people are usually willing to provide. But of course, if you don't have this fundamental self-confidence, if that foundational thing is missing, you have a bit of a problem. And, you know, I mean, I can't really think of many phases in a person's life where they're more in a vulnerable spot when it comes to validation than their teenage years. I spent my teenage years in a boys' home. And while it was certainly better than the alternative that my life would have taken, these places are not particularly good just by the way that they have to work at providing validation and teaching you how to, like, work with emotional intimacy as a person, which is a very important thing to learn. I mean, I essentially had 10 siblings that I wasn't really related to, and my parents came in and out of the place on like a professional work schedule rotation. They would work there for a couple years. I think I saw the team of the group home that I did live in replaced like 2 times during the years where I stayed there. And the people who do work there are encouraged not to develop too deep emotional bonds with us. We had to use the formal you while addressing them and also address them by their surnames, and if you touch them, even like accidentally, you would get punished. Not a heavy punishment, you know, something very, very minor, but it's not really the message that you want to send for the emotional development of a teenager. In addition to this, I was pretty much always expected to act like an adult by all of the adults in my life, especially those in the group home. And I did embrace this role as basically like the trusted figure that the other kids went to when they had a problem that they didn't want to talk to the adults about. And I remember this is like, I must have been like 17, 18 years old, and somebody told me that she thought it was so incredibly sad that I never got to be like a teenager, a young person that does stupid things in order to do stupid things and like try out stuff. And I got really angry at this. I didn't want to be a teenager, right? I already had the responsibilities of an adult. I already got punished like an adult when I did something wrong. At least this is the way that I perceived it at the time. But even though I was expected to act like an adult, I was never actually perceived like an adult. Even though I acted the part, I was never respected or acknowledged as an adult, and I really, really desperately craved that recognition. But no matter what I did, how much smarter, empathetic, more adult I was than even the adults themselves, I was never taken seriously as an adult. I was always relegated to the kids' table, essentially. And because this happened in a very formative time in my life, it's a part of my self-concept that was very, very deeply integrated into who I am as a person. It carried over into just how I view the world and how I view myself in it. I remember having this conversation with a friend of mine, must have been like in mid-high school years, and I was complaining that basically I felt like no one was taking me seriously, and he kept on listing people that he thought like, oh, they take you seriously, and I'm not sure he knew what I meant by that, but to be fair, neither did I. But I think the formative manifestation of this feeling of sitting at the kids' table happened in like a traumatic way, in the way that many traumas happen, especially in your teenage years, in the world of romance. So in high school, there was this girl, basically, right? And like many people in high school, I had never had any kind of romantic relationship and was desperately craving one, which I know is not a great place to be in if you actually want such a relationship. But we got super close, and it happened very quickly. She'd basically text me immediately the second that school was over and she saw I was online at home. We'd hang out in voice chat pretty much all the time, just doing our daily thing, not even talking, and then occasionally when when we did talk, there were great conversations. We just clicked in a way, and there was like a lot of lovey-dovey talk, or talk that could be interpreted as such. Of course, it's nothing explicit because, you know, teenagers. Even if we had been adults, I would have been pretty convinced that she was into me, which I suppose, you know, she must have been to some extent. But then, a lot of people will be able to relate to this, something terrible happened. A mutual friend told me, wait, my dude, you are into her. That is really weird because she never talks about you at all, and she has like a date tonight with a seriously cool dude, and she's very excited for it. Hearing that, like, especially when I was riding on such a high wave of anticipation of, oh, something good's going to happen, kind of maybe a little bit fucking devastated me psychologically. It was probably the first major romantic catastrophe in my life, and it was different because it's not, you know, usually, you know, you ask a girl out and she's like, dude, you're really cool, I like you as a friend, but we just don't click that way. Which is a different thing from, this is how I perceived it at the time, basically like, you know, leading me on, making me feel like there is a chance, and like actively trying to engage with me romantically just so then at the last second, pull the rug out from under me. Not a nice thing to experience. I mean, probably everyone has had this at some point in their life. And so I never met the guy, I've never even heard his name, I have no idea who he is, but my two traumas basically, they connected. It crashed exactly into the place where there was already a scar, and so in my mind, he became like this idealized Giga Chad figure, basically. Just someone who was different from me, primarily because he wasn't sitting at the kids' table. Because you see, in my mind, it wasn't relevant how deep of a connection I had with this girl, how emotionally intimate we were, what attraction there might have been there, how well we clicked, because I was just inherently never going to make it. I was at the kids' table, and this guy, whoever he was at the real adults' table. And that's the important bit. It didn't matter who I was, how well everything went, it was just inherently he played in a different league than I did. But of course, this isn't true. If I wasn't playing in the same league as him, if I wasn't sitting at the same adults' table as him, the girl and I would probably never have clicked the way we did. This whole thing really had nothing to do with me. I was not the problem. Knowing what I know about people today, being like moderately more adult than I was as a teenager, I understand now that she was interested in me to some extent. I was sitting at the exact same table as the other guy. It's just that she ended up picking the other guy. Sure, he was better than me at some things, I was better than him at other things. People are just different. People want different things for themselves. People are attracted to different things to different degrees. And even if I might have been at a different table, it was a different adults table. It's equivalent. They're on the same floor. They're the same size. You get the same condiments delivered onto your fries when you are there. And while an individual person may have preferences for certain tables, in an objective sense, the tables are not actually ranked. They're completely equivalent. And you sit at a lot of different tables because you're not just one thing. You are a lot of different things that people may like or dislike. And that individual person at that point in time simply wanted a slightly different collection of things. Right, this is a very important thing. It doesn't mean that your collection of things is inherently inferior, it just didn't perfectly fit the scenario, but you were definitely playing the same game, you were definitely sitting at the same table, maybe you scored 9 out of 10. Very serious contender. That's something to be proud of and happy about. And if things had been a little different, you would have been the first choice. Meaning that to an untold amount of people, you absolutely are the first choice. It didn't end up working out this time, and that's sad. You're absolutely allowed to be sad about that. But even, you know, clearly to even be considered in the same table, you must have had a lot of very impressive and valuable qualities that made that person interested in you in the first place. But especially when it comes to the example of romance, it can feel like a zero-sum game sometimes. So I'm gonna repass this scenario into a situation that, like, a lot of adults probably are familiar with to some extent, and we'll see what kind of use we can draw from that. So imagine I'm feeling insecure. I'm in one of those phases. Well, I'm just very, very insecure about my self-worth. I basically have none, am in constant need of validation. Also imagine I'm at a social gathering. I know a lot of us have forgotten what those even are like, but just picture that in your head. Also at this social gathering, a woman I find kind of interesting. She may or may not also find me interesting. I may think that she does, I may think she does not. And also there is a good friend of mine, whom I value and appreciate deeply as a person. This good friend of mine is funny as shit. He makes just a great joke. I laugh at the joke because it's a great joke, but then I realize the girl is also laughing at the great joke. Now, if I wasn't in an emotionally vulnerable state right now, this would be a great situation, but because my insecurity is currently dancing the Macarena, it does the thing of the Macarena when they say a Macarena, and I feel this sudden, intense flash of jealousy. All I can see is she laughed at his joke, and that wasn't my joke, so she didn't laugh at my joke. This ruins the entire moment for me, which otherwise would have been a great moment of, like, shared laughter among friends. Even if now I were to make a joke of my own, basically force it, which, you know, let's be honest, that usually does not result in a great laugh, the reason for that would be not because I had this joke, I wanted to crack this joke, but because I could not stand the idea that for a moment she might give him validation instead of me. And then even if the forced joke did land and it was hilarious, even better than the joke from before, it just wouldn't come, the validation. I wouldn't feel it because I would know, oh shit, I did this out of jealousy. This is terrible. I am worthless. And I am of course aware that this has actually nothing to do with me as viewed from the outside. It's purely an internal thing, a problem with my own insecurity. I don't want to be jealous of this guy. This guy's a good friend of mine. I value this guy. But even if he wasn't a good friend of mine that I valued, but like some stranger that cracked a good joke, I got to hear a good joke. I want to be happy for the accomplishments of my friends. And I also want to be happy for everyone's accomplishments, really. So the way to deal with this, I think, is to attack the root issue. And I think I've found a way to turn the jealousy that we experience at that moment into validation. And that validation, of course, will then soothe the insecurity, which is the actual root issue. So what we do is we recognize that the jealousy is there. It's there, it's fine, we know that it comes from the insecurity, it doesn't actually have anything to do with anything. Now we do something that is very often used with jealousy. We practice gratitude and reframe this jealousy into something that is actually a compliment for ourselves. Because the way you could also see this is that this girl is laughing at the jokes of my friend, she also laughs at my jokes. So I am at the same jokes-telling table as my friend, who is funny as shit. And even if I'm not the kind of guy who cracks funny jokes, I'm not sitting at the same joke-telling table there, clearly I am sitting at a bunch of other different tables that are valuable and that these people appreciate, because if they didn't, they wouldn't be hanging out with me. This way I can derive validation from someone else being great. I can become legitimately happy for them. It's all about reframing the emotion. This is how you, like, forge the new pathways up here. Is you have to change the way you think about it. You have to make it a habit to get into this new pattern of thinking. It's emotional labeling, which it's very important, and you can apply this principle to a lot of different situations. Your girlfriend thinks that her celebrity crush is hot? Great news! You clearly are sitting at the same hotness table as this other person. Friend tells you about like a good, deep emotional conversation they had with someone else? Tremendous, you are sitting at the same good, deep, emotional conversation table as that person. Someone on Tinder swiped right on you, did it only really to get like the validation of seeing the match happen, was not really interested in engaging with you. That's great. You're the kind of person who at a glance, they felt they wanted validation from. Throwing a dinner party and someone is talking about another great meal that they ate. Fantastic. You are, I mean, actually right now quite literally sitting at the same great meal table. And even if you're not the chef, you are still sitting at that table. You have your own valuable, impressive, attractive, lovable qualities that are inherent to you as a person. And even if you do not sit at that specific adult's table, you are always sitting at some adult's table. Because there is no kids' table. The kids' table is a construct that only exists in my mind. I am the only person sitting there, and I only sit there for myself. The other people do not see me sitting at the kids' table. And as someone who is insecure, this is an extremely difficult concept to wrap my head around. It seems inherently false. I can't quite put my finger on it. I could probably dig deep, dismantle the metaphor somehow to find out that, haha, this was wrong all along, but this isn't actually because that's the case. It's like this because my mind is built on a foundation of insecurity. The adult table is where other people actually see us. If they're insecure, and let me tell you, a lot of people are deeply insecure that you have no idea, maybe they perceive themselves sitting at the kids' table and you at the adults' table. The guy who makes fantastic jokes, how do I know that he isn't sitting there thinking, oh, she's just giving me pity laughs, but Burger's jokes, she actually genuinely laughs at his, and then he feels jealous about that, even though he's not even actually, like, attracted to her. Or maybe all he sees is that she's checking me out, and not him. And I don't perceive that she is checking me out because of the way that my insecurity warps my own mind. I can only see how she is checking him out. You see how this does not make sense, right? The things that give you this jealousy are simply not true. They are just there to ruin perfectly fine, great even, moments of shared laughter and community and appreciation. And reprogramming your thinking like this obviously is not an overnight fix. This is going to be a long process where you have to build this sort of habit. And eventually, at some point, and I know this because I have phases like this where I do feel perfectly confident, and it took me a long time to get there. A lot of hard work, but it did happen from like a point of where I felt like I was absolutely nothing. You will get to the point where just people who are completely different to you, whom you do not even know, and they do really cool and amazing things, and that gives you validation. Even though you could never do those things. You're like, yes! Hell yeah, man. Fucking that is amazing what you did there. That makes me happy. It'll also make you more effective at validating others. You cannot pour from an empty cup. It doesn't work. But if you work at doing this kind of thing to improve your self-confidence and get rid of your insecurity on a very deep level, which is, there's a lot more techniques for this than just this idea that I threw out here today. You have a lot of options for this. Eventually, when you sometimes manage to fill up that cup, the more you share, the more your bowl will be plentiful. Look, I really like mixing metaphors. It's one of my favorite things to do. And there's gonna be a lot of doomerism in the comments down below. Talk about like objective facts and dominance hierarchies, you know, weird shit. Thing is, self-worth is not a matter of objectivity. You cannot approach self-worth with objectivity. It exists completely independent of it. It's purely an emotionally charged thought pattern that exists inside of your head. You have the comedy genius, pediatric brain surgeon, chiseled jawline, saving lives every single day, highly educated, admired by the community. You know, the whole world really pretty much worships this guy, and he is miserable with his insecurity. Meanwhile, you have some dude who bathes like once a week, maybe. He's fat as shit, living in some basement apartment, playing video games all day, and he's happy. He thinks of himself as great. He has self-confidence literally coming out of his ass. And you know, that also exists in reverse. You have the happy, confident brain surgeon and the, you know, very insecure, unhappy fat guy in the basement. Their insecurity does not stem from their lack of achievements or having certain achievements, not having achievements. It stems solely from their self-perception. As I said before, I get jealous of myself sometimes. I wish I was things that I just objectively am. So you see how this whole, you know, self-confidence and jealousy thing does not work with objectivity. It is purely an emotional matter, and a person who is not insecure is 100% happier than a person who is. Take it from me, I experience both of these states from time to time. And your brain probably already is racing to find solutions why this cannot possibly be true. Oh no, oh no, oh no, that's impossible. And the reason for this is once again not anything objective, even though it will probably try to convince you that it is. The real reason is that it does not support a computation for which the solution is that you are a valuable person who isn't sitting at the kids' table. It's a foregone conclusion. That is why it's racing so hard to do this thing, because it does not allow for this result because of the insecurity. And whenever I don't feel insecure, not only am I happier, I literally become a better person. I have more energy, I can work more, my work that I do comes out better than it usually is. People enjoy having me around more because the validation that I give is more genuine, and I receive a lot more validation as well. And most importantly, I just enjoy life more. Even the bad bits, because I realize that no, even though I am flawed, I am not perfect like every other person, I'm not fundamentally worthless. Try this. It'll be difficult to reprogram your mind, that I can promise you. And, you know, don't despair if you fail. You're gonna fail a bunch of times, but you do this kind of stuff again and again and again, and eventually it does work. Like, pretty much 100% of the time. Go to a therapist, they will tell you pretty much the exact same thing. And you deserve to give yourself this chance to be happy. Thank you very much for watching this video. Like, comment, subscribe, share this to your relevant community, but do not spam them. Consider supporting me on Subscribestar or Patreon, buying some of my merchandise or my short story collection. And in that spirit, I'm pretty sure this was a pretty long video. And see you around, cunts.